staff there.
And they've been very good so far. Now, I haven't played anybody of Oklahoma's caliber, but they haven't given up a touchdown yet, and they've scored 3 defensive touchdowns. So, that just makes the game a little more interesting.
Now, I have no dog in the fox hunt, as you know, but I think this is the must-see game of this weekend because, as I mentioned in hour number 1, Oklahoma getting a second loss right now would be fatal. It's fatal for the national championship.
And it'd be devastating for the rest of the Big 12, too. Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, you lose to Houston, who I think is a good team, and then you lose.
Those are 2 quality losses, I guess, but you can't
overcome it. Here's the problem with it, too, Rich, is in that conference, the way it's set up, let's say they were to start out 1-2 with those 2 losses, and then they get into conference and they run the table. There is no conference title game. People are going to go, yeah, you beat up on the Big 12. The Big 12 is the worst Power 5, clearly, because you couldn't, get through the non-conference. So they would have no chance, even if they ran the table, if they lose this game.
And then, of course, Ohio State to enter the Big 10 conference schedule with 1 loss. I understand that Urban's had quite a nice run, with the exception of last year's Michigan State game, but I mean, you have to figure that running the table in the Big Ten would be pretty difficult to do there, too. I mean, there's a lot on the line is what I'm saying in this game.
There is, and I feel like the credibility of the Big Ten has gone up so much since Urban's team won the national title. And you've seen, obviously, Jim Harbaugh's in the conference. D'Antonio has maintained and done well. And I think we see Iowa. I know people like to write them off, but they're a good football team. Now, there's another game in the Big Ten that has a chance to kind of boost up the Big Ten's credibility. It's Oregon and Nebraska. I mean, it's a little below the radar because there's so many good games this week. If Nebraska wins that game, there's been a lot of pressure on Mike Riley because they had such a bad year last year in his first year, and they lost a lot of tight games. But if they can win that game, it adds to the credibility. And certainly Michigan State plays Notre Dame. That's another, big game. And we're all talking about the power and the weight of a conference now, because that's what the playoff committee is all going to be factoring in.
Bruce Feldman here in the Rich Eisen Show studio. What are the shots for Ole Miss to take down Alabama this weekend on PBS?
I would call it as a puncher's chance. Now, they've beaten them 2 years in a row. They have Chad Kelly, who is a terrific talent, and he's got some guys who can stretch the field. In the last couple of years, they have done a lot of damage against Alabama with big plays. Now, the question for Alabama is Nick Saban, they've outscored 2 teams 90-16, and he's been pissed off about it. I think the biggest frustration he has is they have not run the football the way he thinks. I think they're going to try to impose that at Ole Miss. I think they will, because I think Ole Miss is kind of banged up. I think it's rare for somebody to beat Nick Saban 3 times in a row. Joe Tiller did it, and there was one other coach who did it. I don't know if it was, I'm trying to think if it was Lloyd Carr or who it was, but it's only happened twice. I don't think Ole Miss is going to get him a 3rd time. I really don't.
And then some other games to talk about with you. You've got USC at Stanford. USC, as we all know, got waxed by Alabama. And one game after another, even in the win last week, we've seen players ejected doing stupid stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, how important is this for Clay Helton, in your estimation, taking on Stanford?
I don't think it's a must-win game because Stanford's a tough place to win. But I think the stuff you just talked about at the end was just significant. Jabari Ruffin's, his stomp in the Alabama game was disgraceful. And to not do anything beyond just the short-level suspension of, the half game or the rest of the game, to me, was a bad sign. He also had, they've had a couple of players dealing with some significant issues related to a sexual assault case it's just a bad vibe right now
What do you think Lynn Swann is thinking? Down
I'd love to know what he's thinking, because he did not hire Clay Helton. That was on Pat Hayden. I like Clay Helton a lot. But the challenge here is, I'm not sure why they jumped into having to decide that hire right before the Pac-12 title game. Ultimately, who you're going to lose Clay Helton to? Memphis? I mean, where else? Who was chasing after him? If they had wanted to, they could have got Tom Herman, who had coached one big year at Houston. He's a California guy. I think he would have been a star at USC. They opted, obviously, not to go that route. Clay Helton lost his first 2 games as a head coach, and then they got thumped by Alabama, as you said. If they lose this game and he starts out 1-4 and has the discipline issues that have kind of people are scratching their head at, he needs something positive to happen in a hurry, because USC's so unpredictable, you just don't know what direction that administration's going to go.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.